Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining ITAR weekly online webinar. And also, I want to thank Dr. Nunung, Nuruddin Hidayah for accepting my invitation. This webinar will be recorded. Also, it's live on YouTube. YouTube. After the presentation, we'll open the floor for any question. There is two types for asking the question. You can drop your question in a Q&A, or you can just raise your hand and we'll go one by one to ask Dr. Nuruddin Hidayah for any question. Today, our guest is Nurul Hidayah, joined in Southampton Business School in November 2019. Previously, Nurul worked at the accounting department of Austin Business School from September 2014. Nurul's research interests are connecting in the area of audit, ethics, governance, and complexity and paradoxes in organizations. Her research papers have been published in variety of journals, including accounting auditing and accountability journals in ABS 3 stars. Critical perspective on accounting, also 3-star, Journal of Business Ethics, and the recent paper of accepting for publication in the British Accounting Review, all of them ABS 3 stars. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. Thank you for having me today. So I'll start with sharing my my slides first. Can you all see my slide now?
Yes, but if you don't mind, yes, now it's perfect. Great, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So I was asked by Dr. Ahmed to talk about my research, and then I was informed that some of the audience are PhD students, so I was requested as well to talk about publications. And then, so I think when I thought about it, I was thinking, let me just combine different levels of publication that I've been having, and also my own research interests, and also different type of thought that I have so far as a researcher. So the session today, I will have three main areas of discussion. So first of all, I will start to maybe, I don't know most of you, or maybe most of you do not know me very well, especially if you don't, reside in the UK. Maybe if some of you reside in the UK, maybe we happen to meet in conferences and other research activities. I will then talk about my perspective of research and exploration, which I call as micro-sociological inquiry, and I will link it to my research experience, and then I will have some reflection and sort of future research direction or reflection on what I think is my takeaway and could be your takeaway from the discussion today. So as Dr. Ahmad mentioned, I'm currently working as an associate professor in accounting at the Southampton Business School, University of Southampton. I've been in Southampton for slightly more than 1 year. I was in Aston University for 5 years prior to me joining Southampton. At the moment, I also work as part of the BAFA Special Interest Group, what we call as interdisciplinary perspective of a special interest group. So this group consists of different researchers, and the members are all those researchers who tend to do research in an interdisciplinary manner. So my research interests so far, I am a dynamic person. I open myself, and I don't want to let myself to be secluded in a particular area of research, but mainly my research concentrates on ethics, governance, and audit. That's within accounting, because I'm a person that sits, I think, not only in accounting. It would be a boring endeavor to just stay in accounting without looking at some more interesting thing outside accounting. So I do research in an area what I call as religiosity in organization. So how religion being practiced in organization. And then hybrid organization and complexity, paradoxes, and dialectic in organization, which I think become a golden thread throughout my research papers and my research so far. I have supervised until completion 4 PhD supervision who did a different type of research. So if for those who work with me, I'm happy to help students as long as the project is interested. It's not necessarily within my area of interest, but if there is some interesting thing in the project, then I would be more than happy to help. The 4 listed projects here have been completed some times ago. I'm currently supervising 2 PhD students. One is working at the Islamic Development Bank, is a senior uh, investment banker. So he's researching derivatives in Islamic financial institutions. And I'm currently starting to supervise a new PhD student who's currently working for the Central Bank of Indonesia. So he's researching Islamic boarding school, or the oldest Islamic educational institution in Indonesia. Um, I have some current research projects. So if some of you at a later point want to ask around that area or have similar interests, please feel free to raise questions or to perhaps give comments or anything around that. So I'm currently working on a project almost 2 years now, social housing in the UK, which is very interesting. Currently, we are working on a paper, revise and resubmit for a 4-star journal in public administration. And then I'm currently working with an academic in Indonesia. We look at ACSB, or international accreditation, and how it impacts on the business school practices in Indonesia. The recent project funding, I work with some multidisciplinary researchers as well. This one, we look at the role of philanthropic organization in the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's something that I look forward into involving soon. So these are my publication. I think maybe as Dr. Ahmad perhaps have shared my profile, or perhaps my bio. These are some of my papers. So you can, most of them, apart from I think the last one and the one in CPA, are all open access. So you can easily download it from the journal as as soon as possible. You can access this without having to have any membership or anything like that. If any of you need some of the paper, maybe you have difficulties to access this, please feel free to contact me, or contact my ResearchGate. I put some accepted version over there as well. And then I'll move to my approach to research and how I will then connect it with micro-sociological perspective of individual and organizational processes. So my approach to research, I was a quantitative researcher back in my master era, when I was still doing master a long time ago. I did my master in 2000, so I'm quite old now. My oldest is already starting university this year. So I am then moved into a different domain of research or different approach of research. I'm moving toward from my PhD, starting of my PhD, I'm more interested in qualitative research. And then so from that point, then my interest grow along with the growth of my experience as a researcher, as an academic in the UK. So far, my research concentrates on different type of complexity and how complexity induce paradoxes and different tension within individual relationship or group relationship. I also look at how it is the complexity sits in organization and how the organizational processes take place around those paradoxes and complexity. I also like very much to look at how individual and organizational respond to the complexity, to the tension and the paradoxes. I think it's very interesting, and how it's not only doing research, but as a person at the personal level, we are facing complexity and difficulties all the time. And then by researching this, to my view, I found myself as an individual growing as well to a more mature level. My research approach, I think I could explain it in two ways. So I'm keen to look at multidisciplinary approach of theorization and conceptualization process. I love exploring theories. So I like and I love wandering and then going around different type of theories, going into one discipline to another discipline. I'm not I'm not the person that keep myself in a certain area. So it's easier for you if you want to discuss different thing with me, because I like to have insights from all of you as well. And I also like to look at micro sociological perspective of individual or team or organizational processes. To my view, those micro sociological uh, insights are very interesting, and then allow me to develop different conceptualization and theorization, and also impact. It's not only we are not doing research because we want to have a paper published, or I want back maybe 6 years ago to have a PhD, but there is something that I want to after. I want to feel surprised as well in each of my research. So that's pretty much what is me and how's me as a researcher. Then I will move into what is actually micro sociological inquiry, and how can we as a researcher benefit from it, and what would be the impact on us at the personal level, at the publication level, and different things. So if I'd like to take you to go back to various critical exploration of social context. For those of you here who are perhaps not a qualitative researcher, or maybe used to do a more quantitative research, maybe this thing is something of a new insight for you. Please feel free to raise your hand and ask question later on if you found my explanation confusing, or perhaps you want to ponder more on some of the items I mentioned here. So as a social researcher, as an interpretive researcher, we can look at uh, the field or the social context at different level. And time to time, as both an author and a researcher, as well as a reviewer, the main thing I kept ask, and I will ask, or I ask all the time to authors whom the paper I reviewed, uh, always, where is your level of analysis? So the clarity of our level of analysis in research is very crucial. It's very important, because it then sets the boundary as to how you want to take your exploration further. So at least there are four, actually, not at least, there are four levels. The first level is the microsystem. The microsystem is basically the immediate social environment in which actors or people lives, actually. And then so this is the mundane level, the daily interaction, the daily mundane activities where people or actors are operating. That's the micro level. The second level is slightly higher when there is a what people call as meso level or the mesosystem. So the mesosystem is basically where two microsystem interact. I'll give you an example. For example, if let's say how a group of practitioner interact with a group of maybe regulator, or a group of maybe two different companies competing, or different things. So two different groups or two different microsystems that perhaps interact. Maybe I will come back to this point in my last example of from my research. And then the higher level is the ecosystem, which is a broader social context, which indirectly influence development of both the meso interaction and the micro interaction as well. And the higher level of that is the macro system, or what some call a societal level. So if we are coming to a field and we want to explore what has happening in the field, then we as a researcher, maybe at the point where we collect data, we could collect whatever data we want to collect. But when you want to start doing analysis, narrow it down into a story and a paper, then you have to set your level of analysis. I found time to time as a review in different 3-star journal, I think the main issues where people get rejection most are from the lack of clarity of the level of analysis. If you don't have a clear, not only statement, but also clear elaboration on what is actually your level of analysis, you have a tendency of a messy story and then messy structure of this of the discussion as well. So I come back to my view, the microsystem or the micro level is where I'm interested most, because in there I can explore different interesting interaction, different nuance that perhaps, not many. I was a quantitative researcher. I looked at capital market. My research was mainly capital market based data, and then it's very boring. Looking at microsystem is always interesting. And then what is actually micro-sociological processes in which micro-sociological inquiry want to aim to explore? So exploring micro-sociological processes, basically, we are doing what some call as macroscopic approach to everyday life. We look at basically a higher, or perhaps a general, or maybe something that people already knew about in some area of research, let's say social responsibility or audit practices or ethical implementation, or maybe pressures and then institutionalization and different thing. There is something of a macro perspective into so basically we have a, if you have a glasses, then you put on your glasses, and when you put on your glasses, for someone who cannot read with like myself now, in the past few years I started to use glasses in order for me to read. I cannot read properly because it's too small for me, so I need glasses. So then if I put that on, then I would be able to look at some microscopic interaction, which is very interesting for me or for different researchers out there. Micro sociological processes also involves and how local institutional forms emerge and become legitimate in response to micro institutional demands. Let me give you an example to make it easier to understand. Let's say there is a new law or there's a new rules that requires companies to do certain things. For example, there is a new law where social responsibility reporting is as a mandatory requirement. Then what is actually happening and what is the impact to the organization? What is the impact to practitioners who operate an organization? So that's basically how local institutional forms actually emerge as a response of macro demands or macro level demands. Another perspective of micro sociological processes also involves this is bear with me. I think let me just, I think I missed one slide before I go to that slide. So let me continue with micro sociological processes. Basically, it is a process in which we enable a complex macro question, which is macroscopic approach, which I mentioned earlier, to be examined to people daily life, or to or act as everyday manifestation in a micro level social setting. So basically, you look at what is actually happening at macro level, and then how people operate, how people implement things. Winnick also discuss it as a situational and emotional dynamics in individual interaction and organizational processes. At the moment, for example, what is like now we have seminar, we have webinar online. It's not as nice as it used to be. I can see your faces, I can see your expression, whether you understand what I'm explaining or not, and then you can ask a question right away, you can raise question, you can stop me, or perhaps disagree with me at some point. It's very difficult now. We have to cope with this situation. As a mother, for example, I have to work from home. I have to handle both. There is no boundary anymore. There's no boundary between my professional life and my personal life. So I can have a meeting while cooking at the same time. So how do a researcher can easily explore how does it impact my identity as a professional when I at the same time doing my personal activities. So something of such interaction or such emotion or such situation, and how the dynamics impact on different things both at individual level and organizational level. That's micro sociological processes. It is also micro interactional pathways, or how people, organization, and people and institution are interacting at the micro level. What are the mechanisms that influence or are affecting the processes, and how the processes and the interaction impact on or induce certain type of outcomes. So micro sociological processes is actually a constructions or how us see the social construction, but it is also a way where us as a researcher actually trying to construct, to understand, to unveil, and then to look at the processes of related to power rituals. What is power rituals here? Power ritual can be seen in different level. An organization, for example, if you look at internal audit, it's a power ritual where a power, some sort of power come to oversee something, to scrutinize some type of processes. So power rituals can also be seen in external auditing, or the pressure for social responsibility reporting, the pressure for uh, what is it, like the pressure to have a different type of performance measurement and different things. So it is a way to establish a practice-based understanding of both individual and organizational processes. So the key point which I highlighted here is it is an in-depth exploration and a rich account of social context. Um, how can we do that? It seems daunting, it seems difficult. Indeed, it requires innovative way in securing access. Because if you want to come to a, let's say, a place or an organization, you cannot just come and then you want to look at how people operate. And you cannot just suddenly come to a meeting where different professional debating of certain things. You won't be allowed unless you have an access to such social context. So indeed, securing access is the most critical point in micro sociological processes. So different ways can I won't I won't let you to think, oh, this is too difficult for me, I won't do it. When I was doing my PhD, I never even imagined I would be able to have such wonderful access. So I did case studies of Islamic banking practices in 3 different countries. I did research in the UK, in Malaysia, and Indonesia, and I did in-depth case studies. I stayed in Islamic banks for from 2 to 6 months for each in each country. So it seems, and I looked at that time. What I looked at was Sharia compliance and audit. So it's something which for my supervisor at that time was something of a sensitive case, which they from the very beginning they thought, oh, you're not going to get the access, it won't be easy for you to get the access. But actually, if you try to build up the access, so access cannot just click and come right away, you have to build up the access. So by interacting with professional in different circumstances, in different occasion, or at the moment, what I'm doing is collaborating with professional who work in organization. They're also one of a way to secure access. And it is also a way to have a high potential of impactful research. So in the UK at the moment, I don't know how is it the case in the country where you reside, but in the UK there is a big demand for impact case studies where research bring about impact and changes to the practices of organization and individuals. So uh, because with micro sociological processes, what you do is you are able to unveil the organizational complexity, paradoxes, tension, and dialectics. Hence, you will be able to look at what perhaps is the actors and organizations were unable to look at because of they are trapped into the routine. So I had and I will discuss it further in my first example. So it is also a way in enabling research as as dialogue. Why research as dialogue? As a quantitative researcher, I used to come with a predetermined conceptualization. This is my hypothesis. This is my pre-understanding of my data of based on the theory, prior studies, and etc. But as a micro sociological researcher, what you can do is you go there, you are interacting with the practitioner, you are interacting with the participant, you are actually crafting the production of knowledge. What you started off is not necessarily the ended outcome. It might open a different ways of inquiries in the latter point. I can give an example of my own experience where I explore social housing in the UK. Our initial project started from looking at how stamp duty exemption, stamp duty tax is actually tax applied for those who sell and buy properties, are exempted for a non-profit organization called Housing Association, who are the extended actors or extended institution from the government to provide a social housing for those who are underprivileged, who don't have housing. So for those housing association who includes tenants, social housing tenants, and their board of directors, they are exempted from stamp duty payment. So that was our initial thought of exploration. But in the process, it took us into so many different perspective of the research itself. We look at how the tenants' welfare is. We saw hybridity in the process. We saw different things which we didn't even imagine in the first place. So what I'm trying to say here is, with micro-sociological inquiry, it allows you to craft the production of knowledge, because it is an ongoing and an interactive construction of data, or what we call as construction of data between you and the social contact, between you as a researcher, or between us as a researcher and the participant and the field itself. So it's a very interesting way. If I was a positivistic quantitative researcher. With quantitative research, you have the data. As soon as you write up and then send to a journal, the process for review itself might take 1 or 2 years if you targeting 3-star journal. Then at some point, the reviewer might say, oh, your data is outdated, you have to collect some more data. There's no such thing like that in exploring micro sociological processes, because you are looking at a very interesting, and then the data never been obsolete. So if you look at, there are lots of research using historical micro sociological processes as well. Like, for example, Paolo Quattroni, one of the professor in University of Manchester. He did research on a Jesuit society in Italy, which lives years ago. So there are a lot of things. It doesn't, timeline is not become a struggle for you with micro sociological processes. Let me take you to how is micro sociological processes from my experience as a researcher. So as I promised in the title, I will look at it from an audit perspective. My experience in doing research in audit, and research in ethics, and research in governance and organization. So first of all, in audit practices, what we looked at. So we actually were interested. So we looked at a national audit office. So it's not a big four accounting firms. We look at a national audit office, how government auditor practice. So we as both qualitative and quantitative researcher, I think we all know what, for those who are interested in audit, we all know what reduced audit quality practices are. So it is how auditors conducted audit below the acceptable level of quality in a simple way. So what are the problems has been discussed in the literature because of time budget, ethical culture, client size, leadership, and so many different things. And this discussion is very sort of superficial in a way. Why? How time budget is actually constraining the quality and etc. But there are prevalent findings on what people call, or what the areas call as RAQP or rigid audit quality practices. So there's premature sign off or signing of an investigation too early, rejecting sample because they want to, because of time budget, for example, there's no more time to exploring it, and then accepting clients' weak explanation, and different type of reduced audit quality. But our thought at that time was, okay, if it's an illness, RAQP is basically only a symptoms. Like if we have coronavirus or God forbid, there are symptoms like coughing or having persistent high fever and different things. So all of these RAQP are actually only symptoms. We want to know what is actually going on there. Uh, what uh, what cause reduced audit quality practices? Uh, how are these challenges play around within the real audit setting? So we want to look at the micro sociological processes. So that's why we want to look at how it is actually happening in an audit context. So this is our context, National Audit Office. We did travel with 5 audit teams within 189 hours. So we are interacting with the auditors. We are interacting with clients. We did 50 interviews. We did focus group discussion. We look at so many different documents. So we travel with them. We make observational notes. We look at how they are behaving and interacting with each other between auditors and how they interact with client. So many interesting things that we seen throughout the process. What we found is we delineate some of our findings into this, what we call as paradox of team diversity, where in a team there is a mix of skills, knowledge, and auditors come up with different expertise, but at the same time, with different expertise, it's not easy for them to find cohesion, to work together. So there is two different things that exist and persist and needed at the same time, but this is contradictory. So there is two things that are needed, but it contradictory all time. So we map out how is it in audit context, and we look at it as a process because we want to look at micro sociological processes. We look at what is actually the source of it, which in some audit contexts has already been discussed. As we seen here, if you are interested, I can go through this more at a later point. And then with those complexity, apparently the paradox emerge. So paradox emerges when organizations stimulate distinction between contradictory elements. There is a need for diversity of knowledge, but at the same time, it's difficult to achieve cohesion. So this is then creating different conflict, tension. And as I mentioned earlier, my main interest is to look at how individuals and organizations respond to it. So that's what we actually do. We are looking at how actors or auditors in this case responding to such contradictions and such complexity. So the microsociological exploration basically allow us to look at in a slightly deeper and then dig down into what is the problem. So we were able to find that there is RAQP, as I mentioned earlier, is merely symptoms, and there is some problems. And then our takeaway from this was that basically we can go back to the organization, we go back to the government audit office. We told them this is what happened, you never have any time for planning, you never do this is what was missing, that is what was missing. So part of them is what we call as it is a cascading responses to paradox of audit team. So complexity in the government audit office basically trigger the paradoxes in audit team, because the the audit members and audit team wasn't planned properly, wasn't structured properly. Hence, it creates tension within the audit team as well. And then there is so many, tension within the process, how, for example, team leader cannot lead the team properly, and that cascade down into a member level. So this is, I'm just giving you an example on how micro-sociological processes opens up various ways of exploration. A second example is on ethics, my research on ethics, the drift of multifocality of ethical identity. So basically what I'm trying to say, this is coming from my PhD, and then I have a lot more thought as I grow as a researcher. And then, so what is actually Sharia banking? What is the identity of Sharia banking? How do they maintain, or do they breach, or do they modify the ethical identity as a Sharia bank, or as an Islamic bank? So that was my initial questions. And what I've seen from my data is how the identity drifted and drifted into somewhat a similar type of banking to the conventional one. So it's not actually giving much alternative in different ways. So that's what I then try to develop my own conceptualization on drift, because it's very difficult to find literature on drift, only few literature, but it's not in depth in discussing drift. So what I've done, this is as I grow a lot more mature as a researcher, so I was able to come to this point where I did to what many people call as theoretical bricolage. You are developing your own theorization. So this is the context we are researching. I am researching. I looked at an institution, an Islamic bank in a European country for 14 years of its life, from the initiation up to 2019. So that's a long process. And then the theorization basically allow me to do a theoretical bricolage without doing micro-sociological exploration, to look at how things evolve, to look at how people are interacting, how group, as I mentioned earlier, on a meso level. This is, I'm playing at the meso level, but also microscopic analysis at the meso level. So I looked at how the interaction between the actors in the organization and the regulator. So this is the theoretical bricolage that I was able to develop because of such micro-sociological processes inquiry. This is how I developed the theorization from the data. You can see with micro-sociological exploration, we are actually able to dig down to different reports, to different activities, to different meetings, to different interaction within the organization itself. So I was able to then develop a contribution which is very useful for people in many different ways, to look at how drift is actually a way for the organization to sustain ethical identity, and then multifocality, or how they then change the identity along the way, being multifocal, being reactive to different identity at the same time, in order for them to sustain the institutions. Then my last example is on governance. My latest paper, which I collaborated with an Islamic banker. He was my PhD student. He's one of the leading senior banker in the UK for Islamic Bank. So we look at here again is micro-social interaction. We look at how actors actually work together within and beyond the Islamic banks to in the process of financial innovation and engineering. So what we did is we interviewed 40 key players from 12 countries, and we observed the financial innovation and engineering processes in 5 Islamic financial institutions. We from that micro sociological processes, we were able to look at, conceptualize again a new perspective, what we call as plasticity of the boundary object, how Sharia as a boundary object being made plastic, being made amendable, being made pliable in a way for them to cope with different tension and complexities. So it is actually enable us to develop a conceptual framework on how group of individuals work and collaborate within the context of religious belief. So it is actually an interactive view of boundary object that we are actually proposing and suggesting to the field. So this is one of our contribution. We were able to propose what we call as mechanism of plasticity in a way for actors from different background. This applies to not only Islamic banking context, but it applies to different contexts. So if you want to use it for, let's say, audit context or to social responsibility context, I would say it would works perfectly, because that's how the social context is. So when people are coming from a different background, what they do first of all is to try to make it into the same frequency, you can call it that way. So to transfer divergent knowledge into somewhat what we call as a shared repertoire. So at least you have the same way of communicating, the same way of seeing things. And then you then translate from one's perspective to another, try to reappropriate practices, and in a way for you to transform diverse knowledge and come up with a shared vision on what financial engineering and innovation is all about, because you need to satisfy so many different actors in many different ways. So what we contribute here is we looked at, or we contribute to how governing processes of innovation within a religious context, which hasn't been discussed before in many in any existing research. So we talk about moderating cognitive and social differences through plasticity mechanism, which we dig down or as the insight from our micro-sociological processes. So last, I want to keep the discussion open. Not only me talking would be so boring. I want to hear more questions. I want to hear your opinion, and we will engage to a more interactive discussion. So my takeaway, which I want you to take it as a takeaway as well, is come back to Johnson et al. Paper in 2018 about what is actually crafting a good micro-sociological inquiry. So where, as go back to my earlier point, a dialogic research become a dialogic process of research, where us as a researcher involved in a craftsmanship through our interaction with the field, through our reflexivity of the field, how we develop rhetoric of what the field is all about, how the processes was actually took place, and then try to pick up from there to suggest some theoretical contribution and hopefully a practical and impactful contribution for organization as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Nunung, Hidayah, for your useful presentation. I really like your presentation, and also before opening the floor for any question, please, I heard about your PhD, and I heard about the story behind it and how you finish it. There is here many students, PhD student, mostly, let's say, the ladies, how they are. Also, it's this webinar, it's live on YouTube, and there is also many participants watching you right now, and also on Facebook. So please, I know the story. I know how you finish your PhD. So please, before opening the floor for a question, please, if you can tell people how you finish it and how, the struggles that you have during your PhD and how you finish it in that short time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmad. Yeah, we did discuss it in Portsmouth last time with
Yes.
Khalid. So I think I wouldn't call it as a struggle. I would call it as a wonderful journey. So
Challenge.
if someone asks me how was your PhD, I enjoy every bit of it. So because it grew me as a person and as a researcher. I started my PhD in October 2011 with 4 children, as Dr. Ahmad know already. So I have 4 children. When I started, my oldest was 9 years old. She's now starting university this year. So and my youngest was 3.5 months. So I brought her to the UK on the plane, still very small baby. And I could with obviously I cannot do that without the full support and wonderful support from my husband, who has been wonderful in supporting me in different ways. So I was able to finish my PhD in 2 years and 10 months. So there is actually if someone I was asked by so many people, how can you do it? I don't know. Maybe when you have so many different things to do, you just do it anyway. So for those of you who are still doing PhD and then you haven't married, or you're not having more children like me, then you can do it. So I just try how to do different things at the same time, like cooking while listening to the recording of interviews and different thing. One time my son asked me, Mommy, how can you write when all of us make so much noises? So I just replied to him, because I cannot get rid of you, so I have to work within what I have. But they grew with me and I grew with them. So Alhamdulillah. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
We have several questions, starting
Yeah.
with Professor Mustafa from Qatar University.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
Alaikum salam.
Thanks very much, Dr. Hidayah, for such a wonderful presentation. I just have a couple of questions, and probably you put it as a comments as well. I'm not quite clear the difference between micro-sociological approach and all the institutional economics approach. So what would be the major differences between the approaches that you actually, seems to me, are very pro for that approach now, so micro-sociological? And this is my first question. My second one, actually, well, I totally understand that when we do quantitative analysis, sometimes we lose the data because of the very prolonged process for reviewing, but also how you overcome the reviewers' comments when it comes to qualitative one about the level of subjectivity that the researcher has in terms of crafting the paper. Because when we do these qualitative papers, it becomes like, we have the influence on the crafting the story, the storytelling, and so forth. So how would you actually be able to handle that side? Once more, thank you very much for very nice, insightful presentation, and looking forward to hear from you response to this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Mustafa, for picking up very good questions. Comparing micro-sociological and institutional economics analysis. I know that I would maybe answer it from my experience rather than going into more theoretical or conceptual on how the two stream of research is all about. But let me answer it from my experience in the audit paper, which has been published in AAAJ. So as we all know, audit research are mainly quantitative institutional economic, you can call it that way, through survey or through either quantitative analysis and different things. But none of them is actually exploring how audit is actually all about. So when we write the paper, was actually it is one of the author is a senior auditor in a government audit office. So he found things that, for years, this is my struggle as an auditor and etc. But I cannot find it in any research discussing about what is actually even audit quality. What is audit quality is all about? What influence audit quality in the real way? Only Pentland in 1998 published in AOS talking about that. So we want to actually exploring beyond what is seen there in terms of paper, in terms of number, what is actually happening at the micro level, and how can we help auditors to overcome such issues by maybe it's not providing solution, but at least unveiling or unveiling the problem itself. What is actually the problem? So yes, it is a struggle. Yes, it is not easy. So what we looked at is we look at the practices. So go back to the practices. Maybe what is very, very much in the heart of micro-sociological processes is actually to look at practices, individual practices, organizational practices in hand. So we are actually, as a researcher, being part of those practices. And I'll link it to your second question. How do we deal with the reviewer? So it is an interesting story because that was the longest paper I've ever been, more than 2 years. We are bumped into I don't know who the reviewer are, but I can. It seems to me that those are quantitative researchers that they don't believe any paradoxes or complexity, because in quantitative setting, in institutional economic setting, is you put control. Everything should be controllable, and then you are measuring things that can be controlled. So, but the control doesn't work most of the time. For example, in front of the Highfield campus in Southampton, there is a traffic light. If there's no car, then people cross the traffic light anyway. So that happens in every bit of our organizational life and personal life. And that's what we actually wanted to bring up, and then give an insight. You cannot explore things with being in the top of the mountain without actually looking at what the ground is. So and then that's we struggled at that time, but it's rewarding to my view. We are breaking up the existing tie, because it's not easy for them to, there's no paradoxes. You just don't have the control in the organization, but the control doesn't work because of the complexity. The audit office cannot manage to have a proper planning on who are sitting in one team, and the team has to move from one point to another, because in 1 year, for only financial audit, they have to do 5,000 audits, let alone any other type of audits. So it is again struggle in one point, but the beauty of micro-sociological process is because we are looking at practices, we look at how things evolve, how things operate, we have rich data. With the rich data, then all encounters or inquiries or anything from the reviewers is only a way for us to perfecting or perhaps to improving our paper, because we have all the data. As the reviewer come back, tell us about so and so, you need to link. So there wasn't any question about the data at all. The question is how, because we are bringing new perspective, is convincing that in this new perspective is communicating or linking to the existing domination of audit research, you can call it that way. So another example is Dr. Mustafa, my experience with my CPA paper and GBA letter, GBA paper. So when I actually send the seat of the paper, which now in GBE, to CPA, but the editor at the time said, you are sending us an ethical paper, an ethics paper, where we are as an accounting paper, so you have to change it into accounting. So I just, because of the richness of the data, as I see in the micro sociological process, I only took a little bit of the process. I only took the profit and loss sharing contracts only, and how the accounting of it's only a tiny bit of the data. And then I work again later on, and then sharpen it and then refocus it into only one part of my chunk of the data, which is the case study in the European country, and then develop it into what is currently in GBE as a paper. So again, it is a struggle. Yes, it's always a struggle. It depends on how we see it. I never feel offended or never feel frustrated with the reviews. I always see it with an open mind as a way for me to grow as a researcher. If you take it that way, but again, before I go back to that, maybe the main thing is you have to enjoy what you're doing. So when we enjoy what we're doing, everything will be fun. Yeah, so that's what my view is. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Professor.
Your question. I hope I answered.
Yeah, you actually did, and I share with you all your insights. Being a qualitative guy as well, so I totally understand what you say. I just wanted to know a little bit more about microsociology and how to be integrated to probably broader than the auditing research. Thanks so much for your insights. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Welcome. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Professor Mustafa. There is another question from Dr. Zartaj Fatma.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Ahmed and Dr. Nunung. Sorry, actually I used to call Nura. Thank you for a very nice presentation, and I would like to ask you about the Islamic focus area in solving the recession problems post-pandemic.
Yeah.
So how the Islamic banks are differently solving the recession problem we are facing since pandemic, and how the other banks, non-conventional banks, are solving. So what is the difference? How differently the Islamic banks are solving? Thank you.
Yeah. I'd like, if I pose any question on Islamic banking, I'd like to answer it in two ways. One is the ideal and the current perspective, because I don't want us to forget the ideal as well. Because I grew up back in 19, so it seems that I'm so old now. So I started my undergrad in 1991. So when it was 1992, 1993, there was a seat of Islamic banking, what we call as Baitul Mal wa Tamwil back in Indonesia, and I was involved in it. It was still pure Islamic financial contracts at that time. So I knew how the ideal is. Ideally, because there is this WAF system, the zakah, infak, wakaf, and sadaqah system, and then part of the Islamic banking funding is also, there is some fund that they have to throw away. We go back to our fee standard. There are some that we can see that there are non acceptable fund that has to be put into the ZISWAP for charitable purpose as well. And there's also social, the ideal objective of Islamic banking, or perhaps Islamic economics, I would like to take it broader, is more than only financial perspective. It should be a social objective as well. But unfortunately, the ideal doesn't remain. That's why I think I would encourage you to read my paper in GB, how the drip has happened from the beginning until the end. Then you can see what I'm trying to explain here. In the pandemic, what I've seen, I don't see anything that Islamic banking has done so far in a great detail. Partly is because it's not my focus of interest to look at what is Islamic banking has been doing. But my PhD student is currently working for Islamic Development Bank. The Islamic Development Bank has been trying to develop different schemes to help the Muslim community through any different type of supporting schemes. So that's what I know for sure. But what I've seen in the UK, is more of a philanthropic organization, basically, who are working so tremendously, I think, so far within the pandemics, from masjid and then charitable organization and different things to support different level of society. That's why what interests me to explore this. And then with some colleagues in Indonesia, we won a funding, 3 years funding. Hopefully we still get there, unless the government said we don't have any money anymore, so we're not going to fund you. So we suppose initially to get, we haven't have any confirmation so far. That's why I'm worried about it, because maybe all the funding are absorbed for COVID reconstruction or recovery. So we're supposed to have to get £100,000 for 3 years for the funding. So we look at how philanthropic organization schemes are actually helping. We want to, this is a multidisciplinary research, consists of people from economics, from information technology, and from different, to look at, we will come up in the first year. Our plan is to have a big data on what is actually philanthropic organization has done, what are the mapping of those who are impacted by the pandemic and different schemes. And the second year, we were planning to look at the scheme, the effectiveness of philanthropic scheme. And then my student who is working in Islamic Bank, also involved in this project. We will perhaps try to maybe throw some, idea of scheme that could be implemented by philanthropic organization. So I think if we ask Islamic banking, because they are struggling in the first place to sustain within the hegemony of conventional banking, it might be very difficult for them to even share some part of their wealth for others when they are struggling themselves. So I don't know, but I don't, this is only my personal, and I don't want you to take it seriously, because I don't want to answer something without the proper data.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed, sir.
You
Yeah.
are welcome. Thank you
Can
for
we
joining
take
us.
microfinance? Microfinance.
Microfinance is one of the thing as well, but the microfinance, I did a special, I was a special guest editor from microfinance for third sector review. So if you want to access, there is some in my ResearchGate account, so you can download it as well. It's, microfinance, it's the same, the same drift happen to banking, because again, when it involves to lending, it's a very tricky point. Lending, people who are operating within the lending processes, there are, different logic that, competing logic, you can call it that way, the profit logic, then the social logic. It's not easy to balance both at the same time, to be honest.
Thank you, ma'am. You have given a great exposure on Islamic finance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Tariq.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Thank you, Professor Nunung, for the nice presentation. Actually, I have a comment. I'm very happy today to listen to the new arena that you have provided.
Dr. Tariq, if you don't mind, can you raise your voice, please? It's not clear.
Okay. Actually, I have a comment rather than a question. The topic you are talking today is very interesting for all of us. What we have seen as a professionals and authors or reviewer or auditors in some journals, the lack of the qualitative research. What we're talking about is the behavioral accounting. How to explain what happened, why some people go to this way and other go to the other way. You try to explain why this happened, what the difference and difference between individuals or between organizations, for example. So whatever we're going to apply, what you say in finance and accounting, auditing, this is what we need today. This is very important and encourage the students, especially the PhD students, to register, to have proposals concerning the qualitative research regardless of the area. This is what we need, because the quantitative research is very easy to deal with. Actually, there are some difficulties with the papers that deal with the quantitative, but the most difficult area is the qualitative, how to explain what's beyond the figures and numbers. Thank you very much for the presentation.
You're welcome. So I think I agree with you that, maybe for younger researcher, it's daunting too, and it's scary to engage with qualitative research, because it takes a lot of effort from the very beginning. I mentioned access in my slide. So to get access is one way, and then to get into the context, the field, and how you are successfully collecting data in the field, how you can interact with the participant. As soon as the data collection finishes, then you talk about you are dumped with a whole bunch of data that you have to transcribe. You have to do different things, doing analysis and then doing conceptualization. Well, yes, it is difficult, but one thing that I'd like to encourage younger researcher with is how the beauty, part of the beauty I have explained in the micro-sociological processes. The other beauty is actually, which I partly mentioned, your data would never be outdated. So you have the data there that live forever. And then the difference between qualitative research and quantitative, because I was a quantitative researcher as well, is that, with qualitative research, the tools as ourselves as a researcher. So the more we grow in terms of perspective, the more we grow as a researcher, and then we come to our data, we can tell a totally different story. So the way I look at my data 5 years ago when I did my PhD, and the way I look at it now is different. I can come up with different story at the moment to what I could do 5 years ago, because I was growing as a tool, because I'm the researcher, I'm the tool in developing the conceptualization. So you are actually open with so many different avenues of exploration. Yes, it is hard in the beginning, but you would never, if your data is rich, you would never find any occasion where the reviewer or the reader would say, oh, this is not enough, the data. Can you go back and do some more data collection, and you have to redo the analysis and etc. So because if the data is rich, then you have different ways, and maybe for the PhD student, when you write up your thesis, maybe from your data was only 20-30% from your data that would go to the thesis, meaning you have way of avenues in developing from your PhD into different type of publications. So that's what even now I one of my case study is in my home country in Indonesia. I sat in the bank and I had access with 11 years minutes of meetings. I would be honest with you, I haven't even used that minutes of meetings or the data from Indonesia at all up to this point. I have several publications already. I haven't even touched that part at all. So I have a very interesting story on Sharia audit. I have different type of stories that are interesting, which I haven't been able to touch and do the writing upon it. So it's just because I have so many other projects, so I can come back anytime. It doesn't stop me, so it's not oscillate with it. On the contrary, with quantitative research, maybe Dr. Ahmad can add some more point later on. As maybe 2-3 years after your PhD, then you have to start doing data collection again. So it's that's the beauty of it. And one other thing, maybe as I mentioned earlier, um, I found qualitative research is more a reflection of and a learning process, not only for the organization, but also for myself. I feel more mature by working as a qualitative researcher. And another beauty is I can come back to the organization telling them, because they are trapped in the routine. Like, for example, the National Audit Office, they don't even have time to, when I was so surprised when we came, and my PhD student was initially said to me, because of this research, they don't like my findings and they will fire me, I don't mind. But at least something that stuck in my mind as a senior auditor for years, I need to do something. Don't worry, I said to him, if you don't mean bad, your intention is to provide improvement for the organization and bring about benefit, then you don't have to worry about anything. We went back to the organization, we explained out, and they are so interested with the findings, and they use the finding for training junior auditors and etc. So we bring changes at least, or if we can't bring changes, at least bring understanding, and so research is not then far away from our social context. That's the reason why I came from a developing countries. Why developing countries are what I call as captured so much by the US-centric institutional economic analysis. Partly is then the impact is they forgot about how to build up the country, because it's all about numbers, it's all about statistics. There is no exploration why such thing happen, what is actually the main issue. Without understanding the main issue, we cannot bring about changes. So I would encourage all of you who are still at the PhD level to not worry and then try to take the challenge by doing a qualitative inquiry.
Yes, of course. Yeah, yeah. Thank you for the comment. Even I have a master degree students. She talked what's the impact of the blood type on personality, and then the impact on the investment decision as well. Why? How to explain decision-making process through the type of the blood type itself. You see how to connect the two issues together. For a master students, it worth to be investigated as well.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, good evening, sir. Good evening, madam. I am from Mumbai. I wanted to know whether this audit quality differs from country to country, And also I wanted to know whether what kind of work can I do on. I'm doing some work in audit committees, for corporate governance and audit committees in the organization. So what can be the objectives, if you can tell me in 1-2 lines?
Yeah. I think I won't be able to answer whether it differs from country to country, because I don't like to answer something without data. So I never been comparing country to country's audit quality, but it must be different. Even in one institution to another, the quality is different. And so one type of audit and another type of audit, maybe the quality of different depends on so many different complexities in the process. So I think that's my first answer. The second answer, what can you do if you work as an audit committee? That's marvelous. So there are a lot of uh, questions about the role of audit committee, whether the audit committee is really working as it's supposed to be, because or it's not, and as an audit committee within an organization, you have access to internal issues, not only for the sake of research, but I think micro sociological exploration or qualitative exploration would help the organization itself to maybe uncover the issues and the problems that may be hidden or somehow somewhat uh, being hidden, or maybe covered by so many different things. So I think in audit committee context, it's a very interesting part of the phenomenon, I think. So I remember when I joined Southampton, maybe in the third month, we had a guest speaker talking about doing a quantitative research, how audit committee is interacting with external auditor, so with quantitative variables and etc. And I asked this question, which the presenter couldn't answer properly. Could you please give me an occasion when 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 would you think audit committee meet external auditor, and how could they affect or influence their decision making or their audit process? So can you give me an example? There's no such thing in practice. So then so many different things. I was teaching risk management for 5 years back in Aston, which I really like as well. I developed cases for my student, different cases of risk management practices in different organizations, both public and for profit organization. So I think I had if you go to my research gate, I had a paper, not an article published by, in a Islamic banking magazine. I deliberately aimed it for professional, because I want professional to think. So I talk about 3 lines of defense. So 3 lines of defense is a connection between corporate governance, internal control, and risk management. So audit committee play in the internal control in there. So you can easily link it to internal control, to risk management, to strategy of the organization, strategic planning, different things. Many interesting avenue could be done. Actually.
Thank you, madam. One more question. You told you had this data on minutes of meeting. I also have something like that. So what can be done on that if I want to do some research or some small work to
Yeah,
publish?
then you look at the pattern, what is actually happening there, and then what is interesting. Maybe depending, in my minutes of meeting, there are so many different things, like how the in the initial, because I the 11 years was starting from the initiation of the bank itself, and then when external auditors still come to help for Sharia audit within the organization, and then it moves away into so totally different things. So you can look at changes, you can look at events, on how the events bring about changes to the organization. You can look at identity. You can look at so many different avenues of exploration are open for you, to be honest, depending on what the minutes talk about.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Anil. Dr. Ali?
First of all, I would say thank you so much for this lecture, Dr. Ahmed and Dr. Nani. I have a question, please, about what's your advice for a student who want to study a PhD regarding your experience, because the professor has experience, and I need her advice. What's the most the student should to do before start a research for a PhD degree?
I think everyone can do a PhD. The first thing is motivation, because motivation is very important, and keep the motivation going. It could be a very lonely process, because for 3-4 years you have to stick to one topic of exploration. And then what I would secondly suggest is I can see this. I don't have any basis of data to claim this as a finding, but those who have professional experience work better in the PhD, because PhD is also takes about management, managing yourself, managing time, and managing the processes, managing the emotion as well, to keep the motivation up to the same level, or perhaps maintain the emotional climate in yourself. But the third and the most important thing, what I always suggest to anyone who asks me who want to do a PhD, is PhD is a process of unlearn and relearn. So why do I call it as a process of unlearn and relearn? Someone from whatever background he or she is or she was, must have pre-understanding on things. What you need to do is to unlearn, to unlearn what you think you understand, and relearn things from the very basic again. So by doing that, then you are actually expanding your horizon. One can then open the door. It's like I've seen some PhD students who are professional, and they think, oh, this is what I know I'm doing. This is how this is how the right thing is. This is how thing is supposed to be. You need to break up that concept, and then try to unlearn it, try to remove it, and then try to repeat it all over again. Let me give you an example of my own experience. I knew when I came for my PhD, I was teaching for 11 years already. I was the head of department of an accounting department in a private university in Jakarta for 5 years. So I worked for a long time prior to my PhD, and I did structured trainings and workshop for auditors and Islamic bankers and professional on Islamic finance and Islamic accounting. So I had pre-understanding on what things is all about. So when I started, I was saying to myself, I want to create a framework of Sharia audit. So as if I can, resolve things. But then I realized myself, this is not what is, going forward. I need to, how I was bumped into the more and more the fact of how the identity of Islamic banking has been drifted into somewhat similar to conventional banking. So the ideal is no longer there, or perhaps is one of the things which I really, I couldn't stop thinking when I came back from the one interview in London. So I was one of the when director of an Islamic bank in the Middle East. I don't want to mention the name of the bank. So he mentioned this. Are we talking about Sharia compliance, or are we talking about Sharia inspired? So that quotes I would never forget from my mind. So it takes me to think. So this continuous reflection. So that's why you can download my thesis at Aston anytime if you are interested to read it. At the end of my thesis, I put a point, a section what I call as a reflection. So I did a reflection. So I mentioned that no matter how hard I've tried my best to detach myself from my pre-understanding of Islamic banking in Indonesia and Malaysia. But no matter how hard I try, there must be some level of subjectivity, some level of, because I knew it already from the very beginning. Similarly, I know nothing about UK culture prior to me coming to the UK or prior to my PhD study. And then no matter how hard I try to understand the context, there must be something that I miss about it. So the reflexive practice is something that I think a PhD student or anyone should build up from the very beginning, because this reflective practice is actually helping us not to be easily offended or easily frustrated with the review process, or easily frustrated with many challenges in life, including in our academic lives. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for this information. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed, also.
You're welcome.
I think we have
there is many questions.
Yeah.
Yes, in Q&A. I know. Let's have a couple. I know we take longer than we are expecting, Dr. Nunung. So thank you so much. There is a question from Osama Bukhari. He asked about if you don't mind to send the slides.
Yes, I have sent the slide to you so you can distribute it to participants.
Sure. Also, there is a question from Professor Med Zuhairuddin Arif. How can good governance and ethics be connected in micro and macro level of society?
You know, it's there. It is attached with the micro processes in organization and in society, and both individuals and organizational level, or even societal levels. We should remember governance and audit are not a structure. It's not a machine. It is practiced by human. So when it is practiced by human, there is a level of agency. What I call as agency here is what is supposed to be and what is actually being operated is not necessarily the same. So that tension, if it is human, there is also complexity how things is operated. If, let's say the audit process should be so and so, but there are so many challenges, so many obstacles in the organization, then that pretty much influence the process itself, both governance processes and audit processes. So I'll give you an example. I not from my research and one from my teaching. I taught risk management in Aston for 5 years. So I always like to bring cases to the student. One of the cases I brought to the student was the case of Volkswagen. So how Volkswagen, in terms of environmental level, is they achieve award for it, but then there is a scandal happen. So why this is on paper, the governance and the risk management processes seem in place, but it's not actually in place, because there's without micro-sociological inquiry or exploration, we cannot go beyond what is actually seen at the surface.
Thank you, Doctor. Also, there's a question from Dr. Asya Tawil. She asked about the position of international organization and bodies on ethical and behavioral obligation in auditing.
Okay. So it's not only an audit, even in Islamic banking or any other thing, there's always ethical standard. There's always different type of standards. But again, the main thing is the main issue is all of those things will be implemented by human. And this human, the very human, is then could behaving differently because of different logic, because of different interests, and then so the the competing logic, pressure and demands then influence the practice and praxis in organization. So it always interests. That's why in the beginning, and I will keep repeating this, that I always and will always be interested in complexities and paradoxes and tension, because that's as long as still human. At the moment I write up a paper on so I'm exploring emotional dimension within the interaction of auditor and clients. So because people think that auditors is like a machine, you plug the machine out in the field and it's supposed to work. And then they meet client might refuse, there might be complexity in the field. So it's very interesting to my view.
Also, I don't know, maybe it's the extension of her question. She said the extent of auditors' commitment to the ethical code of financial institutions.
Yeah, that is a big question mark, isn't it? We've seen a lot of scandals with big four accounting firms in the
Right.
UK. If you are familiar with the case of Tesco,
Yes.
overstatement of profit and different things. Again, come back to my earlier point, and that's why I would encourage you to do more micro-sociological inquiry. To explore how things is actually being operated. Even this pandemic, how I'm living in the UK. I don't know with you in Kuwait or in other countries. Over here, the GP do not want to meet patient. so
Yes.
and then how would they perfecting? How would they know about the virus a lot more when they don't even want to meet patients? So things like that. Something that is actually around us. So why do people do not want to wear mask, for example? What is the cultural, things that perhaps, or cultural aspect that maybe influence their behavior, and then so businesses around COVID and etc. So many different things are open for exploration, to be honest.
Correct. Also, there is a question from Martin T. Karika Diwi. The question is, thank you, Dr. Nurul, for your great presentation, mashallah. While we are now in pandemic situation, would you please suggest us how should we strategize our data collection to enable us conducting rich micro sociological inquiry, which perhaps also affected by the physical distancing measures?
Yeah. So I think it's a very, I know Miranti very well. So we know, we're very close. I think I've recently, not recently, but at the beginning of the pandemic, I joined this workshop or training on digital ethnography. So I think now, as everything moved to digital, even now we are. I think it seems to be challenging for us, but I do feel that it's actually, and I do think it actually opens many different ways for us to collect data. So people are more lively online. So your field move into online field at the moment. You can look at Instagram. You can look at different social platform, online platform, and also we can also look at with this. We never imagined that we can meet like this without having to fly to Kuwait, for example, or to Qatar to be able to attend such conference or such a seminar like this. No, it is open for us, meaning we can still do interviews and everything, as everybody most of the time working from home anyway. As long as they're happy to entertain you, and then and you can approach them, then you will still be able to do interviews using Zoom, or maybe you can record if the participant is happy. Then you have another methodological approach by using video for data, part of the data collection. Also, we can easily do focus group discussion by using Zoom or Microsoft Teams or any other way, which we never think it would be easier before. Yes, there are, I think if we go back to the Quran, whenever there is a difficulties, Allah will provide ease in different ways. So I think as long as we can see the positive perspective of things, I think since I could reflect from my own experience in the past few months since the pandemic, I did a lot more online seminar like this compared to the past 5-6 years. So that's the beauty of things, that when we could be able to survive and try to sustain with whatever situation. We need to, the key word here is agility to collect data and to juggle between different things as well. If I can share with you, I don't know, with all of you outside the UK. Now in the UK, we are told by each of our university, in the next 2 years, you're not doing research. Your thing is you need to only concentrate on teaching, no research whatsoever. But it depends on how we can strategize things. I think learning from my earlier story where Dr. Ahmad picked up my PhD experience, when you are in a difficult situation, usually you can cope in different ways, and hopefully, inshallah, we can cope better. I hope that answers Miranti's question.
Yes, last question from Hidayah Fatri. She has 2 questions. The first one, Professor Nunung, kindly could you please elaborate more about the level of analysis in qualitative research, as I am new about qualitative research in accounting area. Please give a real example for that. Second question, what is the borderline between qualitative and quantitative in accounting research? Is the qualitative research in accounting area only related to behavior psychology, sociology, and communities?
Okay. The first question was about, I slipped from my mind.
No worries. The first one about kindly could you please elaborate more about the level of analysis and qualitative research?
Let me answer you with this. If you get the difference, I'll compare it with quantitative in a way. With quantitative,
I think
I know.
The whole question is about the difference between qualitative and quantitative.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. So when I was doing a quantitative research, you set the population. This is the population of our data. So then you trim the data, whatever, you make the data, normalize the data, and etc. But for qualitative research, and you are exploring, especially if you explore micro sociological level or micro level, the social context is, you cannot put, you cannot separate things. You cannot trim the social context. There's a political aspect of it. There's a social aspect of it. There's a cultural aspect of it. So And then you need to set the level of analysis in a way for us to make especially when we write a paper, to make the story clearer. Because if we mix the levels, we can fall to what many researchers call as aggregation. So we are mixing up the level, and the story won't be clear cut, won't be crisp. In a way, it's not clear for someone to understand it in a short run. So it is, for example, in my audit paper, what we look at is actually the theme processes. So our level of analysis is at the group, at the team of auditors. So that's the level of analysis. So what we are actually exploring is just part, or this part of the field that we are exploring, that we are analyzing in a particular context of a paper. Or for example, in my GBE paper, so I talk about organizational ethical identity. So in this thing, my level of analysis is this case organization where I was researching. So that is my level of analysis. I will be exploring the organization, whatever interaction happen in this organization. So I think I hope that helps. The second question was, does it only limit to psychological, sociological? No, it's not. Qualitative and the borderline. I want to also inform you that there are a lot of qualitative research. There's actually positivistic qualitative research. It's not necessarily a microsociological or interpretive qualitative research. So people are coming to the field bringing a certain theory. Let's say I bring institutional theory or institutional logic. Then I brought it to the field, and then that's it. That's what I want to look at. So it's like you are bringing a cup and a jug of water and or a bowl of water. Then you bring a small cup and you pick up the water to whatever fills that little cup. So that's how you see the field. Many people do it because it's easier. You bring the theory and you fit it. But the danger of it is you might not be able to contribute to the field or to the existing studies as much as it could be, because maybe the interesting insight are those water outside this little container. Maybe there are some interesting insight outside those little containers that we bring and then pick up from the bowl. So I hope that makes sense. So yes, it is much more difficult. You need to explore more, but it can be very, it will be very rewarding.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nunung Hidayah, for your fabulous answering the whole questions, and also for the useful webinar that you give it us today. I really appreciated the accepting for my invitation, and hope to see you again in ITAR webinar. Thank you so much. If you have any last word for you in this webinar.
I think it's our responsibility to share with each other. I was working and living in Indonesia for most of my life, and every time I go back, I always want to share, because there are like many of our friends in different countries are not necessarily getting the access as I do get here, getting the exposure as I do get here. So feel free to contact me for anything. We are here to support each other, to support research from non Western centric research areas as well. I know it is still like a second child in a way, to be honest, from different eyes of reviewers, editors, but we have to do something to, as long as we do it in a high quality, then we can bring emerging economies or whatever they call it. They delineate things, they put boundary in it. But as long we have a richer social context, which enable us to explore so many different things, not only for the sake of publication, but the main thing is how we can also create benefit for the wider society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for everything again. And also, I want to thank all the audience that coming today to watching this webinar, and also who is watching us now in YouTube as well. Next week, our webinar will be about ESG reporting, analytic recommendation, and political connected firm by Dr. عبد الصمد العساني from University Qatar University on 22 of October. Thank you all, and hope after you end this webinar, there is a small survey. It will take maybe less than 30 seconds. Please fill it before you leave the webinar. Thank you so much, and see you again next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum.
Alaikum salam.